Hello and welcome. Today we have with us Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, who has spent a lot of time examining the telecom case, particularly the last big issue that has come up regarding the spectrum and what happened to the 2G licenses. Paranjoy, would you explain for our viewers what is the spectrum scam or what is being called the spectrum swindle all about?
The telecom sector is often highlighted as an example of a sector where deregulation has worked wonders. When India became politically independent, soon after that in 1948, there used to be 2 telephones for every 10,000 Indians. 50 years later, in 1998, as recently as 1998, 50 years after independence, there were 2 telephones for every 100 Indians. This was a good few years after the government had given up its monopoly and allowed the private sector to enter the picture. From there onwards, the growth has been truly dramatic. In 2007, that means between 1997 and 2007, from having 2 phones for every 100 Indians, we had 2 phones for every 10 Indians. And as we are talking in November 2009, there are 4 phones or more for every 10 Indians. This is highlighted as the success story of Indian telecommunications. But there's an underbelly, which is often not talked about. And the underbelly is that spectrum, which is electromagnetic spectrum, you can't see it, it's thin air, but it's a very scarce natural resource which has to be regulated by the government. After all, the government has to act as a representative of the people. The world over, that's the way it's done. This scarce resource was grossly underpriced and allotted to a select group of private players at a price that was about 6 to 7 times lower than the market value of this spectrum. As I told you, the industry has expanded phenomenally. But in January 2008, under the tutelage of Mr. Andimuthu Raja, Union Minister for Communications and Information Technology, using a rather dubious first-come, first-served basis, a group of firms got these licenses. An All India mobile license was given at a price of 1,651 crore. This is in January 2008, at a price that was discovered by an auction, a public auction, 7 years earlier in June 2001. Consequently, what has actually happened is that the government has underpriced this spectrum for the benefit of a few players, and the total loss to the country, the total loss to the national exchequer, to the people of India, is, to put it very conservatively, 50,000 crores.
What you're really talking about is the 2G license, which were given to, I think, 9 corporate entities for about 9,500 crores. And the market value, as we can see now, after they started selling that license without doing any development whatsoever, is roughly to the tune of 50 or 60,000 crores. Now, Mr. Raja has given the following defense. One is that he broke the telecom cartel. And that telecom cartel had been also given 1,60,000 crore gift of the spectrum.
By the previous regime.
Now, the question that I have of Paranjoy is that if the minister really feels 1,60,000 crore was gifted away by earlier ministers, why has no action been taken with the government for as long as he was minister? Shouldn't he have referred it then to the CBI himself?
Mr. Raja is raising this issue more than 5 years after it all happened, after he was minister, mind you.
After he was minister.
Not 5 years, but more than 3 years after, 3.5 or 4 years he's been minister. Why is he suddenly woken up to this fact? Why is he talking about this when he has been accused of having engineered this swindle or the scam? Mr. Raja's defense is at best ingenuous. At worst, it is a half-truth. What he has done, he's depending on particular provisions of the National Telecom Policy of 1999, which subsequently got changed by a cabinet decision of the Vajpayee government, of the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government in 2003, when the country moved from a licensing system to a revenue sharing system. That's the loss they're talking about, 1,60,000 crores. And what Mr. Raja is claiming is that he's actually following the recommendations of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. The point is he's picked on one paragraph in a document that runs into over 178 pages. He has ignored a slew of recommendations made by that same regulator, the TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. This is what you call cherry picking, or at best ignoring a whole lot of recommendations and just choosing one to justify why he did not allot this spectrum through a public auction, through an open and a transparent system. Why he followed a dubious first come, first serve policy. I mean, imagine, Prabir, I just want to give you a few facts. In January, one afternoon, at 2:45 p.m., this was announced. That spectrum would be allotted on a first come, first serve basis. There was a 1 hour window in Sanchar Bhavan, which is the headquarters of the Department of Telecommunication. There was a mad melee, a mad rush for people to go and give in their application, which was running into thousands of crores, which required a huge volume of documentation. Is this the way scarce national resource should be allotted?
You know, Paranjoy, the issue that really comes up, that the National Telecom Policy of 1999, to which Mr. Raja is referring, well, actually, if that was the basis, well, 2001, the spectrum was auctioned. The fourth license was really an auction. The first come, first serve principle that he's talking about was only for those parties who had the license, who are awaiting spectrum.
Precisely.
This has nothing to do with the license.
And this was for a very, very specific window to enable that transition from that earlier licensing regime to the revenue sharing regime. So there were licenses that had been issued to a few players and they had not been given spectrum. So you see, what Mr. Raja is doing is trying to obfuscate the issue. The issue is very clear. A scarce national resource has been underpriced, grossly underpriced. Now, the other justification that he has is that the Prime Minister has been consulted, the Finance Minister has been consulted. But both the Finance Minister, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, and the Prime Minister have never categorically said that they approved of Mr. Raja's actions. Consultation does not equal approval. More importantly, there is evidence to indicate that the Finance Secretary, Mr. D. Subbarao, who is now the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, he wrote a very strong letter saying that this spectrum was being underpriced. Even before these companies who got the spectrum sold it to foreign firms and the so-called price discovery actually happened and the whole world knew how grossly it had been underpriced. Even before that, the Finance Ministry had raised objection. But today, it's crystal clear. Based on the recommendations of the Central Vigilance Commission, the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, India's premier investigating agency, the premier police investigating agency, has for the first time ever conducted raids in a minister's office, even while the minister was sitting bang in his office. And not just in the minister's office, but in the offices of all these firms that have been the beneficiaries of his largesse. And there's another point which is also worth noting. Even within the minister's office, within the Department of Telecommunications, there were honest officers who tried to resist his move. The former Secretary, Mr. D.S. Mathur, the former Member of Finance of the Telecom Commission, Manju Madhavan, all of them tried to oppose this kind of, what should I say, loot of public property. He waited. One lady, Manju Madhavan, she took voluntary retirement under circumstances that are best known to her. He waited for Mr. Mathur to retire. He waited for a new secretary to come, and that's when all this happened.
Do you think the Prime Minister should continue to do what he's doing? Basically give a clean chit to Mr. Raja in public?
I think the Prime Minister should come out into the open. I don't think he helps himself, his government, the image that he has of being an honest Prime Minister. I think he's certainly not helping himself or the image of the government by indirectly supporting Mr. Raja. As for Mr. Raja, I don't think he has the moral authority to remain in that position. I think not only he, his political boss, who happens to be the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, the DMK Supremo, Muthuvel Karunanidhi, should ask him to put in his papers. Mr. Raja has brazened it out. He claims he is innocent. He claims he is being targeted. But I think the body of evidence that is against him obviously points towards his not so hidden hand in this entire scandal, which, as I repeat, is the biggest scandal of independent India.
Thanks, Paranjoy, for being with us today and really making clear what the issues are on this rather, shall we say, mysterious issue of the spectrum.